Now, as we mark 16 days of activism against violence against women and children, South Africa's official campaign launches today. It comes as the scourge has reached crisis levels. The coronavirus pandemic saw a sharp increase in violence against women and children, forced to stay home with abusive men, many with nowhere else to go. Now, the theme for this year's campaign is Women's Economic Justice for a Non-Violent and Non-Sexist South Africa. Let's unpack this story for you now. Professor Hlengiwe Mkhize is the Deputy Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and People with Disabilities. She joins us now to elaborate, Professor, on what government's plans are. And I think, we've had at least one other discussion as we build up to the launch of 16 days of activism. And certainly a theme that is coming through is that we seem to be having the same discussions every year when it comes to violence against women and children, and that we're not seeing enough progress. What is your response to that?
Thank you very much, Michelle. Good morning to the listeners. I think it's important, your opening statement, I cannot overemphasize it. The scourge, the anger, mental health issues that go with it, general frustration on the part of women. We have this on an annual basis. Yeah. Firstly, I must explain that it's an international campaign, which was started by the UN after getting a report from women from Latin America, who then were reacting to political violence against the army and so on. But basically, South Africa was amongst the first countries to raise their hand and say, we're in. And we have done this over years. We then said, let's move towards 365 days so that this is the opening phase, but we then continue working on specific issues. I must say, though, if you look at what happened in 2018, the anger, the frustration of young women, mainly from institutions of higher learning and civil society, for me, that was a tipping point of this struggle because they raised their anger loud and clear. They demanded a seminar with the president. And since then, that seminar, which was chaired by the president himself and the deputy judge president, Justice Tani Maya, with, of course, mainly civil society organization and a few government officials, it really came out with a concrete road plan in terms of saying, government, civil society, let's work together. Let's look at all these demands that have been put forward and the product, the president launched it, the National Strategic Plan. What is good with this strategic plan is that it's not a government product. Civil society organizations, they sat continuously working in the presidency, making sure that they come up with a national strategic plan which will bind everybody. Hence the theme now is one of the pillars, which it says you can do everything possible on earth. But if women are not economically empowered, they will always be put in vulnerable positions where they cannot make decisions about their productive rights, about their health rights, about where they want to live, where they want to, how they want to grow up their children, and continuously subject them to gender-based violence and femicide. So this theme is very strategic, and I'm glad that we are launching it to the public today. The Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability, Minister Maite Kwane Mashabane, will launch it with the support of the members of the Interministerial Committee, which means there's a big, it's a government program. It's no longer a program of the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disability. But also, the president has just raised a sense of hope to the people of South Africa by saying, let's look at economic recovery. We saw COVID-19 show us the cracks in the system where women were on the streets asking for food parcels. where levels of abuse increased tremendously. So the strategy now is that whenever we are discussing a big project, economic project, women shouldn't be an afterthought. Right from its conceptualization, the question will be to put women at the center, looking at all the targets that have been put forward by the president himself during August. You know,
Professor,
procurement, for instance.
Professor, sorry, I want to just come in there because I know that you have a lot to say, but I want to get some questions in as well before we run out of time. And actually, I want to talk about the one thing that you just raised there, the issue of launching this new theme, specifically focusing on economic opportunities for women for these 16 days of activism and launching it to the public. That is one of the big criticisms of government's reaction to the scourge of violence against women, that it is largely performative. There are these big launches. You know, the president himself this week, in fact, in his presidential letter to the nation, also talking about this groundswell of public support for the campaign, the 16 Days of Activism campaign, which many would disagree with as well, that there is this groundswell of support. I think people are very disillusioned when it comes to the 16 Days of Activism campaign. We're seeing a lot of things being launched. We're seeing a lot of press releases being put out, the minister issuing statements as well. Very different when it is on the ground, the women who are facing these economic challenges that you're talking about.
Michelle, I'll be the first one to admit that women, more than being disillusioned, I think they are impatient, intolerant, and angry. They are saying to us, it's not time for talking, it's not time for new policies, but it's time for action. Hence, I was saying, you know, the difference in my understanding of what is happening today during this sixth administration is that when a new project is put on the table, our department, for the first time, is even strengthening the monitoring and evaluation division within it. So that is to begin to start an engagement quickly, be it with the Department of Trade and Industry, or with the Department of Small Business, or a Department of Tourism, the opportunities to say how much, if the project, the business case says is worth 3 billion. So how do we ensure that a certain percentage of that will benefit women directly into their pockets? The president even said to us, engage even on financial inclusion, engage the financial institutions. Those are new strategies which really in the past, we spoke a lot about our frustrations and anger about gender-based violence, but the empowerment component was not targeted and measurable.
Prof. Mkhize, let's talk about targets and things that are measurable. The emergency response plan that was announced by the president also came with a commitment of 1.6 million rand that would, 1.6 billion rand that would be used to implement this emergency response plan. How has that money been spent to date?
Michelle, you know, first of all, that debate for me is always ringing in my mind, and I'm always feeling it because I saw consensus from all political parties, which is rare in Parliament. Parliament is a political space. But after that, it gave departments a leeway to act quickly. The outcries, remember at that time, was around the criminal justice system. If you follow the seminar, people will tell you about the police not taking up cases, not having the test kits that you need for evidence in court, the criminal justice being too slow, cases being dropped, and of course, the question of shelters. But, you know, with that emergency response plan, the president expected to get about 1.2 billion from government departments themselves. He said, all government departments who have been allocated funding for violence against women, let's put it together and see what are the things that we can do immediately. while civil society and relevant government departments like ours are still working on a national plan. And of course, the police stations were the first ones to make sure that the face and look is appropriate, there's privacy, but also the question of test kits. That's where I went to one police station far away outside Port Elizabeth, and I was surprised. The police themselves telling me their experiences of helping young women and girls who approach them having been sexually violated, that now they can take them to the local hospital with a test kit, and then they are examined, and then that's the first evidence that they have that the sexual offense did actually happen. And so the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development had an opportunity to expand the sexual offences courts, which are critical. We had them years back, but somewhere we stopped. But they managed to expand to rural areas and begin to say there's no place to hide. A person cannot commit an offense thinking that, oh, I will go to the tribal authority and I would slaughter an animal and the case will be over. But the sexual offenses have been spread to those communities as well. So the shelters, there was a concerted effort to expand the shelters as well. So generally, generally we began to take the steps which we're not going to take if we're waiting for budget allocation of this year. So I would say it has had impact. We have to monitor closely that nobody drops the ball, because if you had the test kits yesterday, it doesn't mean you have them today, you'll have them tomorrow. There might be, again, procurement mishaps and all the usual excuses that women get.
Yep.
You might get a terrible police who will refuse to take your statement, but today you can report directly to Minister Ecele's office.
Professor, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much this morning for joining us. It's such an incredibly important and complicated issue. It's been called our shadow pandemic here in South Africa, the issue of violence against women and children.